And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we are talking about what the Chicago Bulls are all in on as far as their direction and their roster build. And so, before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Mazelis slam dunks in games. And so, in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And we're talking about what the Chicago Bulls are all in on. And so if you have not got a chance to see this, you can go over to ESPN.com. This was written a couple days ago. And so it's talking about all 30 teams, and it puts teams into these tiers. And so everybody is all in on something. And so just to give you an example of some of the columns here that they have, or the tiers, they have like all in on a gap year, all in on draft positioning. They have all in on 2 timelines. And so you get just the example here that you're going to find within this article. And so with the Chicago Bulls, they have them as all in on nothing. And so this is what it says about the Chicago Bulls. And so it lists them with the New Orleans Pelicans. You have the Sacramento Kings. You have the Toronto Raptors as well. And so this is what it says with the Chicago Bulls. It says that in Chicago, the offseason saw the Bulls extend lead front office executives Artorius Karnisovich and Mark Eversley, as well as coach Billy Donovan, but they've made the playoffs once and have won a single playoff game over the past 8 seasons, and have repeatedly failed to extract draft pick value out of trades for veterans Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine in the past year. One light at the end of the tunnel in Chicago, plenty of cap space next summer. All right, so look, all in on nothing. I think that is a bit harsh. And so I get where they're coming from with this, but I have a little bit of a pushback here. And so the first thing that I want to talk about is Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, because I do have to give the Chicago Bulls some credit here, because they did pivot off of those players. Now, did they pivot off of them too late? Absolutely. Should they have gotten draft capital or more draft capital out of these guys? Yes. And that is a result of doing it too late. And we continue to see that with this front office, that they continue to hold on to assets much longer than they should. And, this is something that AK and this front office are going to have to change. And so I do have to give the Chicago Bulls credit in the sense that they have pivoted off of that team. And also, too, they have gotten younger. And so they have actually picked a direction. And I don't think that you can say that they're just all in on nothing. And so I know, it's frustrating as a Bulls fan, with being in these play-ins and stuff like that. But I can say that they have at least gone ahead and they pivoted off of this older team now. They've just moved on from Lonzo Ball, this season. And so that probably Vooch is going to be next at some point. And so the Bulls do have a direction, and they've gone younger. Now, the question is, what are they going to do with this young core or young players that they do have? Because one of the tiers that they do have on here, which I think really should be the goal for the Chicago Bulls, is all in on their young core. In fact, this is what it says in the ESPN article here. It says that all in on building around young cores. And it says that all of these teams have both current talent along with players they hope will grow into significant contributors down the line, and or high value draft picks that they'll hope will only enhance their respective cores moving forward. So you have the Atlanta Hawks, Detroit Pistons, Memphis Grizzlies, Portland Trailblazers, and the San Antonio Spurs. And so I just think that the Bulls, they've gotten younger, and I think that this is probably the next step for the Chicago Bulls, which is all in on building around your young core. And I think that when you're doing this, now you do move next to the next tier up, which ahead of this one is actually winning a championship before the window closes in the next tier. That's the next tier up in the article. And so I just think that this is where the Bulls need to go to. And I think that they are somewhat trending to it. I think it has been a bit of just I mean, the process has not been the smoothest here because when you look at the players that the Bulls move, so going back to the DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and all those situations like that, if you're going ahead and you're saying, okay, we're going to go all in on our young core, that means that what you're going to have to do is you need to invest into your young core. And so that goes into going out there. You need to have the coaches in place. And so I think that that's why it's a little bit of a head scratcher with what happened with Peter Patton, especially with what he was able to do with this team last year. Then you have to think about the development piece. And so that means that you have to be extremely patient here. And then when you're building, around a young core, that also means that you need some additional draft capital. I think that that is where you look at this and you go, okay, if you're going with your young core, which is fine, you need to go out there, you need to get multiple bites at the apple so you can continue to go ahead and double down on this young core. And so I think that that's where the Bulls have really got to pick it up. My personal opinion, they need to find ways to get additional draft capital, which means this: you have to get other draft picks besides your own. And so they still have a chance here. And this is where AK can really turn some things around because you have some expiring contracts. You have a decision to make with Kevin Huerter. You have a decision to make with Zach Collins. You are going to have a decision to make with Ayo Dosunmu and also to Kobe White. And by the way, I'm not in the camp of moving either of those players because, yes, they are a little bit older, but they are still young and they still fit your timeline here. So you really still have a good young core, a good young nucleus here, because with Montes Bazelis, you have Noah Asingay, you also have Josh Giddey. Those are the youngest players on the team. And then you also have Julian Phillips, who's only 21 at this point in time. And I know, with Julian Phillips, you're wondering, okay, can he show a little bit more? I understand that. I get that. He may not, or he might. Either way, you have a younger roster and you've got some pieces that you can find something out about them this season. And so this is why, it was important for the Bulls to pivot off of those players to where you can give them an opportunity to play. And so let's see what the Bulls do here, because I do think that they are maybe a player or two away from really starting to trend towards going, hey, we are all in on this young core. And so, if you are, then that means this, that as these guys, perhaps figure it out, and we're talking about Kobe, we're talking about Ayo, we're talking about Modest and some of these younger players that are on the Bulls roster. Now what happens is if you have gone out and you've done the work and you've gotten multiple draft capital, that means that if you are able to sign Kobe and Ayo or, whoever else it is, on this young core, and then you decide, hey, we've hit on one of these draft picks and you want to use, a player that you have on contract to go out there. And just going back to the point that it says here in the ESPN article, when you're building around the young core, when you have some players' current talent along with that young talent, this is where you can go out there and you can get you some young or some established talent to go with these younger players to go ahead and turn this thing around. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, what is the direction for the Bulls? Are they all in on this young core? Do you feel like that, there is really no vision for the Chicago Bulls? Because I do think that we are starting to see a vision. I think it is starting to really shape out a lot slower than we wanted to, but I do think that there is absolutely some hope. But I do think it comes down to AK in this front office really executing with these expiring contracts. Again, if you're going to go with Ayo and you're going to go with Kobe, which I think they are going to do, that means that you had better take care of what you need to do with Vooch and his expiring contract, Kevin Huerter and all these guys like that. You need to make sure that you're in position to continue to not only get younger, but to put some pieces in place to go along with your younger players. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking with the Bulls. Are they all in on nothing? Do they have a vision? Is it about the young core? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.